The sixth generation of gaming is often considered the golden era, and one of the most prominent features of said time period was the 3D platforming Sony PlayStation trio of Naughty Dog, Insomniac Games, and Sucker Punch. Ratchet & Clank and Jak and Daxter were generally the ones that were raking up solid numbers in terms of sales and reviews. However, the third one, Sly Cooper, didn't seem to get as much traction as the latter two. In fact, to describe how overlooked the first Sly Cooper was, it was nominated the best game no one has ever played from GameSpot, and ranked 22 in GameSpy's most underrated games of 2002. But even with this rather underwhelming reception, Sucker Punch still pressed on, and eventually they'd go on to make one of the most recognized 3D platformers for the PS2, which is hard to imagine considering the humble beginnings of the original entry. At the time, Sly Cooper and the Thievious Raccoonus was only Sucker Punch's second game after Rocket Robot on Wheels for the N64. So not only was Sly Cooper struggling to find a proper identity, but so was Sucker Punch as a game developer company. Of course, Sly 2 and 3 would later grow a beard with their improved mechanics, but Sly 1 was where you saw the basis of the stealth platforming gameplay. And yes, I know most of you are probably wondering why I'm reviewing this one again. Well, let's just say the original review isn't something I'm particularly fond of. Certainly the colorful cast of characters is what helps this game's presentation. We have Sly. He's a bit of an egoist. When it all comes down to it, he's willing to put on the line anything in order to steal back his family heritage. So, now that I'm somewhat better at articulating my points, I decided to give this one another stab. After all, I'd rather look back and say I did my best when all is said and done. So, not wanting to go on for too long, let's dive into the film noir, comic book world of Sly Cooper, and to see if the first game is a cult classic like everyone says it is, or a crusty old title that deserves to be infested with cobwebs like that old PS2 controller in the corner. Now, on the surface, Sly Cooper and the Thievious Raccoonus doesn't look like much. In fact, compared to the likes of other 3D platformers commonly making use of an open world at the time, Sly appears antique with its more Crash Bandicoot-esque hallway simulator. Of course, there are a lot of mini-games to break the core gameplay, but these were redundant. However, a closer examination would show the original Sly Cooper had its own subtleties to differ from other early 2000 3D platformers, and this mostly involves its edgier, more adult tone. So I don't think I need to explain that this game came out around the GTA era, and quite a few franchises felt the need to become darker to appeal to the masses. And this is seen the clearest in this game's story. So the narrative begins with Sly introducing himself as the heir to a long line of masterclass thieves. The special aspect about the Cooper clan is that instead of stealing from ordinary people, they stole from other criminals, for there was no honor, class, or glory in thieving from normal civilians. All their work was recorded in the Thievious Raccoonus, and Sly was the next one to inherit it until a gang known as the Fiendish Five murdered Sly's father and ripped the Thievious Raccoonus into multiple pages before scattering across the world. However, not all was lost for Sly Cooper, for eventually he met his lifelong friends of Bentley, the ingenious turtle, and Murray, the charming but gullible hippo. Together they teamed up to steal back the Thievious Raccoonus from the Fiendish Five, all the while trying to evade captivity from Carmelita Fox, who's got a love-hate relationship with Sly. Overall, that's quite a bit to digest, especially for a game that managed to get away with an E rating. With concepts such as murder and revenge, Sly Cooper definitely steers clear of the lightheartedness that was pretty common among other mascot platformers of the day. Yet at the same time, it also sort of embraces it. And this is where the greatest strength of Sly Cooper and the Thievious Raccoonus comes in, and that's tonal balance. Basically, it manages to maintain a lighthearted tone while introducing darker elements. On one end, you have Sly Cooper, who's a character that will stop at nothing to achieve a vengeance. The quiet, sulky voice of Kevin Miller reflects one that is angry and traumatized for his poor circumstances.
Yeah, and I'll swipe whatever it takes to get shot out of that cannon and steal back my family's Thievious Raccoonus.
However, his teammates reflect opposing characteristics. Bentley the Turtle is an intellectual who is constantly anxious about the dangers Sly's in. Matt Olson provides a nasally voice to articulate this nerdy trait. Maybe for some, it might sound like it'd be cringy with how their individual personalities clash, but it actually creates some funny moments.
If my my knowledge of mechanical engineering serves me right, applying significant rotational torque to achieve maximum velocity will yield a positive result.
You mean something good might happen if I can get the wheel to spin fast enough?
Isn't that what I just said?
On the other hand, you've got characters like Murray, who's a dumb, charming hippo that keeps getting himself in trouble. And Chris Murphy creates a more flamboyant voice to reflect this. Granted, I know this was originally to make him bisexual in earlier drafts of the narrative, but it still works in a context to lighten the mood of Sly's angsty character. He's also at the safe house gaming or playing with ping-pong paddles, which accentuates the cuteness of his character. These contrasting personalities are even seen with the villains of the game. On one hand, you have the maniacal, menacing antagonist Clockwork, who's a robotic owl that has kept himself alive for thousands of years to haunt the Cooper family. Plus, his voice is just the icing on the cake for someone who's truly the embodiment of evil. But at the same time, you have Carmelita Fox, who's not really a villain, but basically is still an active force against Sly since she's always trying to catch him, and for the most part the interaction they have with one another is somewhat flirtatious. It's like despite the fact they spite one another, there are little innuendos here and there. If only Roxana Ortega could pull off a better performance. She literally reads all of her lines like a bored actress. And I could even expand this theme of tonal balance to the Fiendish Five. For the most part, they all have these really traumatic backstories of why they became evil, but at the same time, they are a bit comical. For instance, I'm sure it's relatable when the Panda King gets shunned by the noblemen, but then again, he actually thought to try to impress them with one firework. I repeat, one firework. I don't know about you, but I find it funny trying to figure out where his reasoning came from that he believed he could get qualified with one firework. Or for that matter, Sir Raleigh. He doesn't even have a traumatic past. He just sort of got bored, went into piracy, and became a crook. The end. Like, that is probably the laziest writing I've ever seen, but also very funny at the same time. These certainly serve as humorous contrasts with the more tragic backstories of Mugshot and Ms. Ruby. But Sly Cooper's unique charm is not only found in the characters, but also in the environments. All the levels have a particular distinction that fits the area they're set in. Mesa City is a bit of a weird one because there are quite a few levels that take place in casinos. And last I checked, gambling is banned in Utah. Maybe Arizona could have been a better place for this world to take place in? But despite this little misstep, the casinos actually feel like gambling establishments, with many slot machines to smash in a surrounding area, as well as a special hook that Sly can grapple onto to make tons of cash fall down. I don't know much about gambling, but I do have an idea that people who partake in it get or lose lots of money, so it was cool to see Sly Cooper try to use the level design to demonstrate that real-world detail. Similarly, Flaming Temple of Flame has Sly going through a training ground. Because of this, there's one section where there are several trainees practicing. They honestly make the most annoying sound as you move about the area, but it still brings a lot of life into detail. I don't mean to hit on the Crash Bandicoot games, but a lot of the levels, at least in the first two games, usually felt like, here's a temple level, here's a jungle level, and often it didn't feel very distinct. Sly Cooper, on the other hand, has special subtleties into levels that almost gives them their own personality. In fact, I'd go on to say that the level designs are the greatest strength of the original Sly Cooper. Similar to platformers like Abe's Odyssey, Sly Cooper utilizes a combination of stealth and platforming. However, sometimes the game uses its elements in different ways. In the level High Class Heist, Sly has to run away from dual lasers that are emitting from a statue overhead. His approach could simply be to run around the laser gates blocking his way forward, or he could take the pro gamer route and jump over them, all the while staying out of sight of the overhead lasers trying to track him. It forces the player to take a different approach, instead of introducing them to a set of generically placed lasers and spotlights. In this situation, because the security behaves differently, the player needs to figure out a different way to navigate around the obstacle. In the level A Cunning Disguise, Sly needs to use a barrel to not only block the bullets of pressure-sensitive dart guns, but also conceal himself from spotlights and flashlight guards in order to blend in, kind of like what Solid Snake does with boxes. The problem is that these unique gameplay styles aren't used very often in the game. There's basically one level that involves you using a barrel before the endgame stage, which expects you to be able to utilize it to hide from numerous spotlights at once. It would have been nice if there was at least one other level that taught you how to use the barrel, because it feels like a real jump in difficulty from going past some simple darts and spotlights to being expected to do both at once. All the while, a very annoying creaking sound rips into your eardrum. Thankfully, there are other factors that make up for these issues, such as the music. On the surface, Peter McConnell seems to have gone for a more atmospheric direction for the worlds. However, one of the most interesting features of these tracks is how it'll change depending on whether Sly is in danger. When he's simply walking through the level, the music is quieter and more melodic. However, when he gets caught by an enemy or alerts the guards, a faster-paced song starts playing. It might sound like a little aspect that makes minimal change, however, it helps solidify Sly Cooper's identity as a stealth game. Because there are different tracks that play depending on the danger level, it really emphasizes the threat if he's caught. If the same overworld track played through all circumstances, then you wouldn't be able to feel the pressure to be sneaky. So even if stealth wasn't the biggest factor in Sly Cooper, the music helps make it feel as important of a component as the platforming. And of course, sometimes the levels have a unique structure that breaks the mundane nature of constantly running through a hallway. In Lair of the Beast, the game makes use of a lot of the logs and branches to better teach you how to use the rail slide. It all accumulates to one big monster chasing you through the swamp, Crash Bandicoot style, which makes you use everything the levels taught you thus far to escape the beast. The fire down below requires you to run on a rotating gear to work a conveyor belt. Sometimes there are spotlights that you need to dodge, so you need to alternate between running and jumping off the belt to transport a fireball to break an obstruction. It's very simple level design that requires you to observe your environment to progress. But of course, besides variety in the level designs, Sly Cooper has a lot of collectibles to satisfy the extrinsic OCD desires within us gamers. Technically, there are 3 tasks to complete, 2 of them being optional. Each of them are initially denoted as an outline that gets filled in once you finish it. The keys allow you to progress through the level, while the clue bottles give you a page of the Thievious Raccoonus, which gives Sly another move. These include diving forward with his cane, throwing an exploding hat, and slowing down time. While a lot of these are really cool, they're not really necessary as there aren't really any situations for Sly to use them. So, in a way, the feeling of accomplishment you get from collecting all these clue bottles is not as satisfying as it could have been, because you won't be using a lot of these new abilities. Most of the enemies go down with one hit of your cane, so these power-ups are kind of tacked on. And can I just mention how boring the exploding hat is? It literally looks like an exploding ball of gas. I would insert a fart joke here, but I'm too classy. Finally, there are the Master Thief Sprint Challenges. Honestly, it's just another one of those get to the end of the level before time runs out. It's very much in line with the Relic challenges from Crash 3, but there's one big difference here, and that's the reward you get from beating them. After you finish a sprint challenge, you get to listen to developers' commentary of that specific level. Maybe not everyone is interested, but I always like getting a snippet of a behind-the-scenes look at the production. If DVDs were able to do it with movies, why can't games? But besides sleuthing around, Sucker Punch also provided a host of minigames and vehicle sections, and, unfortunately, most of them suck. There are ones that I thought were functional, like the submarine and a turret defense with Murray, but then there's whacking 50 chickens for a ghost to drop a key. Ms. Ruby's lair is supposed to be about mysticism and occult themes, so what does hitting chickens and avoiding bomb-toting roosters have anything to do with those things? So thematically, it feels misplaced, and the entire practice of swinging your cane like a raging alcoholic in a vain attempt to hit as many chickens as you can was redundant. And then there's Racing with Murray. Now if you thought racing in 3D platformers was bad, well, Racing with Murray won't do much to change your opinion. Even with the nitro boosts, there's just no sense of speed as you go around a track. Maybe if Murray wasn't sticking his head out of the side window, this van would have moved a little faster. And the minigames don't stop there, because we have to talk about the bosses. Yeah, I love dancing to Ms. Ruby's rhythm game or flying through Clockwork's rings. Not. In fact, these are probably some of the strangest bosses I've ever faced within a 3D platformer. So with Raleigh, he swallows a bee to swell himself up, and he tries to squash you. I mean, this is a frog we're talking about. An ingenious frog, as a matter of fact. They could have done something like Engine, in which he used his own machinery against you, but no! Instead, somebody thought it was a good idea to have a frog blow himself up and try to squash you. But it becomes even more nonsensical with Mugshot. Basically, while dodging his guns, you're supposed to flip all the mirrors into surrounding area to build up enough heat to fry him. Like, what? I mean, maybe with the way the light refracts when it goes through glass objects, I can kind of see how this can produce enough heat to melt him, but it's just really strange how Sucker Punch came up with this idea for such a battle. Usually most confrontations against giant bruisers involve outsmarting them somehow. This just feels like they couldn't figure out how to design this boss at the drawing board, so they just slapped something together. Ms. Ruby's boss fight's peculiarity is kind of self-explanatory. It's a rhythm game suddenly thrown at you and not based on anything we've already done before. I guess one thing that's even stranger is the fact that you don't even have to match the timing in this fight. You can basically button mash if you want, which kind of destroys the purpose of this battle, but hey, it makes the fight a hell of a lot easier. The Panda King isn't really as strange as he is a bit embarrassing, especially since he's hyped up to be this threat that can destroy villages with his fireworks. Yet, instead of using his pyrocytic weaponry against Sly, he tries to kill his nemesis with his technique of Flame Fu. Well, he must not have fully developed this fighting style out, because he goes down like he's nothing. He'll shout out each of his moves like he's about to do something that's a spectacular feat, and all you have to do is swing your cane in his face several times, and he's done.
Your skill with that cane is unparalleled.
What skill? All I did was whack you several times. And then we finally get to the last boss of the game, Clockwork. With all honesty, it's really not a bad fight. The atmosphere of the lake of lava in the center of combat is very scintillating. The fight has an interesting third phase that requires Sly to platform his way across the debris of Clockwork's destroyed machine while dodging attacks and lasers, but unfortunately, most of the fight takes place while Sly is riding on a jetpack. And for the most part, the jetpack controls are a little loose for lack of a better word, so trying to dodge attacks like flying in the center of rings, which sounds easy on paper, can actually be difficult because it's so easy to misjudge where the center is. Maybe if the jetpack didn't move so slow and wasn't as dodgy, this could have been an epic final boss, but I have to say that the second phase was admittedly just as frustrating as I remembered it as a kid. It just makes smashing his face in at the end of the fight all the more satisfying. But at the end of the day, bad minigames and boss fights don't destroy the package that is the first Sly Cooper. As a matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say it's a pretty solid first entry. In a way, Sly Cooper and Thievious Raccoonus is like getting to know that really introverted guy you never bothered talking to. On the surface, they might not seem interesting and rather mundane, but after getting to know them, they turn out to be more investing than they appear to be. These are words from my therapist, not my own. Similarly, Sly Cooper and the Thievious Raccoonus can easily be dismissed as another Crash Bandicoot knockoff. Now that seems to be the case looking at how it barely managed to surpass selling 400,000 copies to get the Greatest Hits edition, as well as the general reception not being as good as it could have been. However, a closer examination shows that they introduced a lot of new elements to the 3D platforming genre, like a film noir atmosphere to convey the feeling of playing through a graphic novel, to managing to find a balance between whimsicalness and edginess in its characterization. Hell, even something like the in-level bonus commentary was an innovative feature in the sense that previously they were limited to only movies. Sure, maybe the sequels polished out some of the issues of the first game, but without Sly Cooper and the Thievious Raccoonus, where would the sequels be? It's kind of like what Sly retorted to Clockwork. The Thievious Raccoonus doesn't make great thieves, it takes great thieves to make the Thievious Raccoonus, which can be read that everyone contributes to some part to make something greater, as cliché as that might sound. And indeed, Sly Cooper and the Thievious Raccoonus definitely manages to still provide groundwork for the sequels while still holding up on its own. Well, that's all I have for you. Thanks for getting this far in the video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.